everybody, it's Mike with my video of the week. This is the first week in April, and it's actually a very historic, very special week in the history of pop music and rock music. This is the week in 1964, so 52 years ago. This is the week that the Beatles held the top 5 spots in the Billboard 100, the Billboard Hot 100 singles. And that is something that had never been done before. It has never been done since. If I remember, I think 50 Cent, believe it or not, came closest. He had 3 in the top 5, but no band has ever had 5 singles in the top 5, all 5, other than the Beatles, this week in 1964, 52 years ago. So obviously I'm not old enough to remember that, but I have done a lot of research and I've read a number of books about the Beatles, and I can appreciate the impact that they had, not just on the pop scene, and they did change the face of music forever, and again, somebody my age and even younger probably can't appreciate that, but they certainly did, had a seismic shift on pop music and rock music. But also America, you know, if you go back and you know your history, 1964, the beginning of the year, we were still as a country mourning the assassination of JFK. And there was still kind of a pall over the entire country. And then in February of 1964, the Beatles land in New York and they appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, and they go through the roof. And that is the beginning of Beatlemania as we know it here in the States. 2 quick stories that I love about this. First of all, I heard Paul McCartney tell this story once on David Letterman. He said that right before the curtain rose in the Ed Sullivan Theater, which wasn't called that then, but called that now, the stage manager was about to open the curtain, and he said to the Beatles, said, "Are you nervous?" And they're 22, 21 years old at this point, and they're like, "No, kind of," but they wouldn't admit it. And the stage manager says, "Well, you should be. There's 73 million people watching." And when that curtain went up, it was a pretty amazing thing, but they certainly did perform well. And the second story that I love so much, and this is one of the impacts that the Beatles have had on popular music, is that the Beatles wrote their own songs. As a matter of fact, that week, 52 years ago, of those 5 songs, 4 of them are originals. One of them, obviously, Twist and Shout, is a cover. But this was a unique thing. It doesn't seem unique anymore because most artists and a lot of bands write their own music now. But back then it was pretty unique. You know, I always think of the Beatles as the third huge rock star. Frank Sinatra, who, you know, you could say, well, rock star, he didn't really do rock music, but he was a rock star. He had all the makings of a rock star, the fame, the groupies, the money, everything else. So Sinatra didn't write his own music. Elvis comes along, and Elvis is huge, obviously, and Elvis really created the whole image of what it meant to be a rock star, but he didn't write his own music. The Beatles wrote their own music, and the story that I love so much is that the Beatles went to see the Rolling Stones rehearse one day, and the Stones at that point, this is early in both of their careers, but the Stones are still doing pretty much 50s American rock and roll and R&B covers, and Paul and John pull them aside and say, you know, if you write your own music, not only when you sell the music will you make more money, but you'll make the publishing on it. And so, you know, financially, and this obviously, especially from Mick Jagger, perked him up a little bit. And Mick and Keith said, you know, how do you sit down and write a song? And Paul and John literally sat down and within minutes scribbled out a song and a melody and gave it to the Rolling Stones. And it became an early hit for the Stones, but it was also an inspiration for Mick and Keith to say, wow, we can write our own music. So those are 2 quick Beatles stories. I've got a million of them because I've read a bunch of books, and I just, it's my favorite band. So what I invite you to do this week is celebrate the Beatles. I really think they are a band worth celebrating, whether they are one of your favorites like mine or just a band that you kind of mildly appreciate. Take a listen to some albums. My plan this week is I'm going to listen to every single Beatle album, front to back, song 1 through the end, and I've done this a number of times in the last few years, and you can really kind of follow the maturation process, especially John and Paul as writers, going from some of those pop songs early on to some of those really in-depth and you know, heavy kind of songs that they wrote later in their careers. So I'm gonna listen to everything they put out, but obviously if you want to celebrate the Beatles this week, you don't have to go that far. pop a song on that you haven't heard in a while and give it a good listen, or an entire album like Rubber Soul, or one of the really, really good ones, and listen to it front to back, because they are a band that 52 years later, maybe it's hard to appreciate the impact they had, but they did have a huge impact on all of pop music and really the American culture of the 60s as well. So there you go. That's my video of the week.